All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at what our next challenge would be. So we have the initialization of the function firing off. We have that debug log firing off. So we know things are working up to this point. So now we need to start thinking about the actual logic of what we want this to do. So we have our paintings, and those are in array. So then what we need to do is go ahead and initialize the index here. So let's switch over to our code, and we have the array here. And then notice in our start function, we want to initialize which painting is going to be active. And technically, we could do this in the variable itself. So we could say, we could call it like current picture index or whatever that is. And then in the start function, we would want to go ahead and disable any other painting. So let's work on that next. I think that would probably be the best thing. And so just to make sure that we have this working, over in Unity, we're going to select each one of these disabled paintings, and I'm going to go ahead and turn all of those on. Now let's go ahead and switch back to our code. So with all of those turned on, what the next challenge is to initialize the initial painting. So what is its current index? And then we're going to make that the current picture. And then are going to need to iterate through all of the pictures or paintings in the paintings array. And so we're going to need to know how long that list is. We're going to iterate through all of them, and then we're going to set them to disabled except for the current picture index. Okay, so give that a shot, and then we'll move on to the next video. All right, so how did that challenge go? So the first thing that we'll need to do is initialize which painting is active, and that means that we need to initialize an integer for the index of our paintings array. So here at the top, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to use a private accessor, and we are going to get the integer of this. And what we want is the current painting index. And we can go ahead and initialize this value with whatever we want. So we could say 0 if we wanted to. And so that will start with the first item in the array. Now what we need to do is we need to take care of the issue where we have all of these paintings enabled, but as a programmer, we want to make sure that whatever the current painting index is, whatever the starting one is, then we turn all the other ones off just to make sure that we don't have any sort of errors happening. So in this case, I'm going to come down just above my notes here, and we want to iterate through all of our paintings. So to iterate, we're going to use a loop of some sort. And typically, we're going to use a for loop. And so I'm going to say for, and then we need to basically create a variable that is going to be our iterator. So I'm going to say int I, and then we need to initialize it with a value, and that's going to be 0 to start out. Now, it doesn't always have to be 0, but typically we do see that it starts out with 0 and then iterates up from there. Then we need to give it the condition. So we're going to say I less than, and we're going to say paintings.length. And this is basically going to just check how many items do we have in the index. And so it's going to look through. Now, it doesn't start at 0. It just starts counting at 0. So index of 0 means 1, 2, and right now we have 5 different items in our list. So as long as I is less than 5, then it will continue to iterate upward. And so we separate that with a semicolon, and then we say I plus plus. Now, in the for loop, we want to do something. What I want to do is I want to set each one of the objects in the paintings array to be disabled. Now, we use the setActive function to do that. And the setActive function requires a true or a false value. And so we are going to go ahead and set the paintings. And in the array, we're going to pass in I. okay, the iterator. So whatever number we're currently on. So on its first loop, paintings I is going to be 0. So for the first index of paintings, we are going to set active, and we're going to put in a condition in here, or basically a comparison statement here. So we want to say whatever I is, so in this case, it's going to be 0. If it is equal to the current paintings index, then we're going to set that to the output of this equation. And the output of this equation is going to be true. So that will ensure that 0 is active. But let's say that on the next iteration, I equals 1, then I equals 1, 1 is equal to 0, and that is false. So it will turn the current iteration of the paintings to be false in its set active. So it will be disabled. So now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and test it out in our scene. So in Unity, let's go ahead and hit play. And what we should see is that first picture there. And then we can left click on that and it says painting clicked, on mouse down. Great. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and test out any of the other pictures and see if we get the same result as the on mouse down. So to ensure that we have this working, let's go ahead and set our index to 2. So with that set, let's go back into Unity. And in Unity, if we have the index set to 2, what we should see is painting 09 being enabled. Okay. And we should be able to click on that and we should see this painting clicked here. So let's hit play. And we have a new painting here. If we pause it, we can look and we see painting 09 is enabled and the others are set to disabled. And then if I left click on the painting, you'll see that nothing is happening. So because that's not happening, I need to look at my code and determine what's happening. Now, we know that it was working with the first painting. And so that means that something about the first painting is different than the other paintings themselves. So let's take a look. If we look at painting 08, I see that something has changed here. So what are those components that are missing? And it looks like we're missing the painting click script as well as a box collider. So on all of these, I can select them all at the same time and I can add in, let's do the painting click script while I'm here. And let's go to box collider and add that. So now all of them have box colliders attached to them. Let's hit play and test this out. So now if I click on this, we see that on mouse down is working as intended, and we can come through and we can test all of those paintings, but I think at this point we're good. So now that we have finished up the process of initializing which painting is going to be set active first, let's go ahead and move on into our next video.